the rankings. The rankings gods have done it again. Right now, apparently this is the hill I want to die on. Apparently I'm just not ready to let go or willing to let go of the idea of how ridiculous the rankings are. Now, understand where I come from in case you're a new viewer. I love the rankings. But I'm also a guy who gets paid to sit on his ass in front of a camera, and it gives me a jumping off point every single Tuesday at 8 a.m. Never a time that rankings come out that I don't now have something to discuss, particularly on a low day. I can look at the controversy of the ranking. I can look whether or not I agree with the ranking. But I will always have something to discuss. And it also puts us, the MMA community, in line with other sports, of which all carry a ranking. In that regard, great. My resentment towards the ranking is you coward fighters who don't want to get in there and do any of the heavy lifting, and you use your weight of getting out of something that this guy isn't ranked high enough. Now, the rankings have struck yet again to prove how much they stink. They did it this morning. Jon Jones is the #1 ranked pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Why is that ridiculous? Because Jon doesn't have a license to fight. Jon doesn't have a contract to fight. Jon has not fought in a meaningful period of time, and you come forward and you still want to say, yeah, but he's the best. Okay, Khabib fought more recently than Jon. Meaningfully more recently. 8 months more recently. And Khabib is not ranked. How? We were having a meaningful debate X amount of time ago of who should be 1 and who should be 2. There was even a time, because Khabib asked for it, he did nothing more than ask for it, but you guys did put him at 1 and you moved Jon to 2. Now you've moved Jon to 1 without fighting, and Khabib's not ranked at all. How? Well, gee, Chael, real easy answer. Khabib retired. How can you say Jon hasn't? Khabib used the words, I'm not going to fight again. That was enough to get him unranked. Jon used other words, but his actions were the opposite of them. He hasn't fought. As a matter of fact, he has no contract to fight. He has not identified a weight class, and he has no license. But he's ranked #1. Not only is he ranked #1, he moved up from 2 to 1. Now, I'm not sure that the rankings don't have it right. By the way, I'm not sure that if I wasn't in charge of the rankings that I would also have to take a guy at his word. I would just be confronted with reality, which is this guy's word is he's going to fight again, but he did it 8 months less previous than the guy who says he's not going to do it again. Who are you to tell me who I can rank? If we're not going to look at people that are active in doing it, but moreover, we're not even going to look at people that are licensed to do it. My father was a plumber, worked hard every day. But a plumber doesn't mean he worked for a plumbing company. It's a level of education and schooling that then comes with what's known as a journeyman's license. It is an actual term. Had my father let that license expire or he didn't update it, he would no longer be a plumber. And if he went and took a job and tried to charge wage, claiming to be a plumber, and he didn't have that little license in his pocket, it would have been fraud. So before you tell me, Chael, quit talking about his license. All he has to do is fill out some paperwork. You all have a license too that are 16 or older. And if you don't have a license, you can't operate the vehicle. You don't have to go in and be tested every year, but you are going to have to renew that. And if you ever don't renew it and you get pulled over, you're going to find out the big difference in having a license and not having one, in being currently licensed and formerly licensed. So the rankings committee took Jon Jones, who used to be ranked #2, is now #1, not having fought, took the #1 guy who was Khabib, who fought 8 months more recent, moved him out completely. And then they moved up Fazayev. They moved up Surreal. Those things seem to make a level of sense. So you got one really weird one in conjunction with 2 that make sense. But that's this Tuesday's. If I was to take you back to a Tuesday prior, we had guys who moved into the top 10 who had wins, but they weren't over top 10 guys. I also think the rankings got it right. I don't think an Islam Makhachev has to beat the #4 guy in the world to be ranked #4 in the world. I think we can juxtapose the performances. We can look at what Islam has done, look at the lack of opposition he had to face. And I don't mean a lack of competition. I'm talking about the lack of offense his opponents were even able to mount because he was so one-way aggressive. And I think that you could take him from a #14 to a top 5 spot, even if he didn't beat one of those guys. But you don't. You, who argues on the side that my favorite fighter shouldn't need to fight so-and-so because my favorite fighter has a number 3 next to his name and that guy doesn't have a ranking at all, you're kind of left on an island by yourself. You're playing third base wearing a catcher's mitt. Meanwhile, you give me a Sean O'Malley, who I think has a ranking. I don't actually know, but he's got a beautiful record. He's one of the most important guys within the division. He's a main card or higher fighter, and you put him against anybody you want. What's the difference? What is possibly the difference? Because you'll never get around the fact that Daniel Cormier, who was a number 1 contender, took on a barista who was not in the organization named Pat Cummins. Daniel beat Pat Cummins. Daniel's next fight was a main event against Jon Jones for the World Championship. The rankings are ridiculous, but nobody in the rankings department needs to be embarrassed. They're not meaningful anyway. They weren't meant to be. They were meant to be something to talk about by a guy like me who used to love to talk about it. My only disdain and pushback to the ridiculousness, which is our rankings, is that you fellow fighters are using them as an excuse to be a coward.